Hey everyone, so in class we are making zines, as you all know. And so with this, I kind of wanted to talk to you about the zine making process. So here's a zine I made last semester. My work primarily right now is dealing with how bears are seen in society. So I collected images of bears as I have seen them like through the years in society. I used a bunch of different processes for this. And so I sort of appropriated Smokey the Bear for the front cover. And then I kind of used repeated motifs through this. So I took this image and I put it under a light box. You can, with a sheet of paper on top of it. You can also do this by putting it up against the window and tracing it that way. And so you'll notice that this hand, and the shovel I use over and over again. I also traced the words. So with this, I was thinking about emphasis and thinking about repetition, all those good words that we use in class with our vocabulary. So we start here with Smokey the Bear. And then just sort of thinking about like, if bears have nowhere to go, where are they going to end up? I ended up with a bear in the city where, the trees start disappearing and becoming fake. The plants start becoming fake. I tried to emphasize depth, create depth with things in the distance being smaller away. So you can draw with this. So basically you're taking your images that you collected and then you're turning it into a collage. So these, with mine, I'm sort of using, here's again, images that I saw and found. In society, people, mothers like to talk about being the mama bear, but then also, bears are hunted. So that's kind of where I was going with this. And again, emphasizing depth and sort of this journey of bears. This right here is a transparency that I laid over, and we see that repetition again with that finger that's from this first page. And then here are some of my drawings. These were all separate. I drew the city on just like a piece of paper and cut it out. It was sort of in a square. Drew the city on it. This was cut out and put behind. These were all cutouts too. And so, this one is finished. I'll go through the process of how I would make, starting from scratch with the zine here in just a second. But I just want you to realize all these things were collaged together. Here's my last one. This was separate. You can even follow along and see where I cut it out. And so we've got a bone. This was separate. This is just a piece of paper that I drew squares on. And then I've got the shovel for sort of, the end of this. Again, the shovel was traced from the image. And so, you can have a lot of fun with this. Think about your elements and principles of art. And if a page, if it's not flowing the way you want, add one of those principles to add emphasis. And then here is how I closed out the book. So here's a finished one. Let's talk about how we go about doing this. So the zines we're making in class, we're using 3 sheets of paper, and we are folding them in half. And so to sort of get started, I have some things already cut out. I have this bear here where I left a little bit of the underside. I cut that. It's sort of creating a plane. Here's one of those stickers that I talked about where I made a transparency. This is super easy, and I'll show you how to do this in just a second. It involves tape. So let me put that down. And then I have all these other things. Maybe I want to make it look like, there's a bunch of bears going off into the distance. you know, start creating distance that way. Maybe I pull this. Remember, things that are closer to you are bigger, things going off into the distance, but it's a little bit more interesting when you start crossing these things. So notice that once I cross and overlap, it activates the space. Other things you can do if you don't want to go this route is you can make a bunch of different little background pieces. Let me pull this up. And so all this is me drawing with Sharpie and marker and cutting things out. You know, this is just lined paper. Again, this is all me just drawing things. And so if you want to go about this in a slightly different way where you're not creating depth, then you want to think about, you know, adding interest. So maybe I'll kind of do something like this. Here's one of my bears that I've drawn. Maybe I want it sort of overlapping in that way. You know, what if I bring in this clock? So you want to think about contrast. You want to think about things pushing and pulling. And so this is a fairly, you know, dynamic image that I didn't have to work for too much because I simply had everything I needed to play. And so that's what you should do. Print out all of your items, cut them out, and then just start arranging and playing. Like, what does it mean that, you know, I'll move this stuff over. What does it mean that this bear sort of, you know, having its own sort of moment? This bear's in the background, pulling trash. And then, you know, again, you can sort of overlap. You notice the contrast here isn't that great. So this is where you may want to bring in something else. Maybe something like that to sort of just push it forward. Okay, let me show you how to make those stickers. So let's do it with this one. So for this to work, you have to have printed something on a printer that has ink in it. So some printers are called laser jets, and you don't want that because it doesn't actually have ink. This has ink. We can even see it when I move it back and forth. You can see the sheen of what's happening there. So that's the first thing that's important. The second is you need tape. And then this is going to make a terrible noise. So hang on just a second. Let me first find where the start of the roll is. All right, sorry, I had to get in a fight with the tape dispenser. So you need packing tape. And you're gonna try and get it in one piece, and then I'm gonna rip it over here so it doesn't make a lot of noise. Well, it still makes a lot of noise, but I did my best. And so you're gonna want to try and make it the same size as what you're doing. If you're doing something a little bit larger, you can overlap the tape. The important part is just making sure that we're getting good contact, because what's happening here is that the tape is grabbing a hold of the ink. And so you just want to make sure there's really good contact between the paper, which is sandwiching the ink up against the tape. Okay, so you're going to want to leave it a little bit bigger than what you're doing. This is for your own sanity. So when you're holding it and trying to get the back off, it goes fairly quickly. So I have some water here, and I'm just going to put this straight in the water. Let me just leave it there for a minute. While that soaks, I'm going to show you one other drawing combination I'm working on. So these are images of drawings that I printed out. This is a little bit different from what you all are doing, because again, you're taking these images that you have seen and documented of repeated phenomena, but don't forget, you can do anything else to this as long as it's manual. So, you know, if you want to draw and have your drawings sort of incorporated with your work, you can do that. Okay, I think that's probably enough time. So you want to leave it in here long enough. Ooh, it stuck to itself. There we go. Thankfully, it was wet, so it didn't do too much of a bad job there. So you'll notice that the back of the paper has become a little bit gray, and that's what you're looking for. This is why you want this a little bit bigger. And then you're just going to start like rubbing the back with your finger, and you'll notice that the paper will start to peel off. If it's a little dry, don't hesitate to like use a little bit more water on your fingers, or even dip it back in, changing direction that you're peeling. Pulling it all off. And, you know, make sure you're keeping all of your items sort of away from these wet areas so you don't mess up your paper. This little area, I don't think got quite wet enough. So we're just going to do a little dunk back into the water. I'm going to pull it back out. Wow, this is really fighting me. So you just keep going with it. And I'm recording. So I just keep going with it. And we're going to use a piece of paper towel to dry this off. And you'll see that it's become transparent. It's also still a little bit sticky, which is good because that means you can just stick it right on to paper. So like with this, you can see now that you can kind of layer things on top of one another and making it into, it's become a sticker essentially. And when it's dry, it's still fairly sticky. So that's how you make this transparency sticker. All you need is to make sure you have printed out in ink and then taken the back off, and there you go. So that's all I've got for y'all today. So that's all I've got for you today. And so, you know, just remember with this, please play. This isn't meant to be something that is stressful. It's meant to be something that is fun. You're making these images for other people to use. So, you know, repetition, and again, having lots of different items that you've made, you know, even things like paper towel can be really interesting if you like, you know, cut them up and use it as texture. So you can put this sort of like behind. So go into the zine project and just have fun with it. That's all for now. And like I said, have fun.